Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chaser, joined by Alex Lord. Alex, you wrote about this recently on the site. Go look at it, check it out at sportstalkatl.com. Bleacher Report recently came up with a list of teams that should tank for Caleb Williams. Now, for several reasons, I think this is stupid, but I think the primary point is this Falcons team just went out and spent $70 million in free agency. They're coming off a year where they went 7-10. They're in the worst division in football, have the weakest schedule in football, and have a coach in Arthur Smith who wants to win every game. He's made that very known that that's his number one priority. There is no way this team is tanking with Arthur Smith as head coach. There's also no way this team should tank because they have way too much talent. They're a quarterback away from actually being competitive. Maybe not a Super Bowl, but being competitive in the NFC, which only features maybe one elite team in the Eagles. This team can make a run at the postseason, maybe even win a playoff game, host a playoff game. They are trying to win every game. I don't know if they're just not paying attention to what's going on in Atlanta. We're an easy horse to beat. We're an easy horse to beat because everyone just thinks, oh, Desmond Ridder's our quarterback. They're going to suck, blah, blah, blah. It might not be fancy, but we're going to win football games this year. We're not tanking. We're trying to make the playoffs.
The Falcons haven't had a good quarterback under Arthur Smith. Matt Ryan was a shell of himself. He had a noodle arm. We saw what he was with the Colts. That wasn't his fault, but he still was just not a very good quarterback anymore. He lost a lot of juice. Marcus Mariota was even worse than Matt Ryan was. And Desmond Ridder is a rookie. So, the whole notion of, the Falcons are terrible. They got a tank. They finished 7-10 with arguably bottom 5 quarterback play in the NFL. It's only a matter of time before this team starts to make some noise in the NFC under Arthur Smith. All they got to do is have average quarterback play, and it should be a playoff caliber team, especially in this division, which is by far the worst division in football. A lot of people are overvaluing the Saints. I think the Panthers are probably just as good as the Saints. I think the Falcons should be favored. I have no idea why the Saints are. It's probably just because of the quarterback position. Derek Carr is a much better quarterback than Desmond Ridder. But if we're talking on paper, coaching staff, the Falcons are superior in every way. There's no way Arthur Smith is the kind of guy to tank. There's no coach in the NFL. There's no player in the NFL that would tank. There's no player in any professional league that would tank. Anytime, teams do tank, it comes from the top. It's an executive decision. The NBA, they just make their roster as bad as possible, shutting Dame Lillard down for the last 20 games when they're out of the playoff race, those kinds of things. The NFL is not like that at all. The best quarterback Patrick Mahomes couldn't go on the worst roster and lead them to a playoff berth. It's very circumstantial when you talk about quarterbacks, and there might not be a better offensive supporting cast than the Falcons. It is arguably top 5. And if we expect Kyle Pitts, Drake London, all these guys to take that next step, Bijan Robinson, this is a playoff team. It's not going to be in a top. If we are in the top 10 picking next year, something would have gone horribly wrong. We severely underachieved, and if we're in the conversation for Caleb Williams, sell the franchise. That if we finish worse than 7-10, which would be in the conversation for Caleb Williams, something would have gone horribly wrong. I do not believe in Arthur Smith. I don't believe in Terry Fontenot. Something, everyone should have gotten hurt if we're in that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we might be talking. I know we don't think Arthur Smith or Terry Fontenot is on the hot seat by any means, but if they do that bad, they're in the conversation for Caleb Williams, they will be on the hot seat because this team is not trying to tank. They're trying to win games. And if they're playing that bad, there's a reason. And listen, I love Caleb Williams. He's a superstar. He's going to be the number 1 overall pick. If you plug him into the Falcons offense tomorrow, I would be talking a lot different about this team. So yes, there is something like, I would be like, damn, this team might be able to win maybe not a Super Bowl, but they could compete in the NFC. And who knows if some guys develop and stuff like that, it would be an entirely different conversation. He's that good of a talent, but you just don't build winning cultures. You can tank in the NBA because you only need one good player. If it's Victor Wembanyama, or if it's LeBron James, or if it's someone like that, okay, you get that guy. Yeah, you're starting to compete immediately. So it kind of works. And they don't necessarily tank in the form that the players don't try. They shut players down. They gut the roster. They do stuff like that. You can say the same thing about hockey or something like that, where one star can make a difference. A quarterback makes that difference, but like you said, Patrick Mahomes isn't succeeding on the worst team. And more than anything, when you build a culture of losing, that's how losing teams stay bad. You keep losing. It's very hard to get out of that culture. I can't remember a single time where an NFL team went out there and purposely tried not to win games and came out better because of it. It just doesn't happen. You talk about Stephen Ross in Miami. What have they done? Yes, they got Tua. They were tanking for Tua. He ended up going to the 6th pick in the draft, and they ended up getting him anyways. But they were tanking for Tua. They got their guy. And what? Have they made the playoffs? They haven't won a playoff game since, and they've had problems. They had to blow everything up. They lost draft picks. It just doesn't work in the NFL like it might in other leagues. You got to build that culture. You got to do that. And no quarterback, I don't care if it's Caleb Williams or anything else. It's very rare that you get a guy that's Patrick Mahomes. There is no other Patrick Mahomes. Like Caleb Williams is probably not going to be as good as Patrick Mahomes. He might not even be close.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes isn't even Patrick Mahomes he just went to arguably the greatest offensive play caller in history. Brett Veach is one of the best GMs in sports. I mean, he went to a perfect situation. He was the 11th pick. Like, it wasn't like Patrick Mahomes was coming out of college.
They were a playoff team.
Caleb Williams, yeah. So
they were a playoff team perennially.
It's a totally different conversation, and you don't want to take 2 steps back if you're the Falcons. You finally got free agents to choose you over better teams. Calais Campbell didn't come to Atlanta because, there was money, because he could have gotten just as much money elsewhere from Super Bowl contenders, legit Super Bowl contenders. But he chose Atlanta because of the culture. You don't want to take steps back just to get, Caleb Williams. Listen, he could be a superstar. We both believe in the guy. He's going to be a stud in the league. But there's never been a moment in the NFL where one guy makes or breaks a team. It's never been that
now,
way. It never will be.
There is a scenario where everyone, like we said, gets injured and you end up with the number 1 overall pick. Like that could be a blessing in disguise, but you're not going to purposely get it. Because like you think about Joe Burrow getting hurt and you get Jamar Chase. You think about guys getting hurt and the Chiefs move up in the draft and they're able to get Patrick Mahomes. Like if something like that happened and you just lucked into the number 1 pick because everyone got hurt and then everyone got healthy and made those advancements that we think they're going to make, then it's like, okay, like we kind of lucked into that and maybe it was a blessing in disguise. But I've said this about every NFL team. I don't care. I don't sit down on Sunday. I don't care if we're 3-12 on week 16 and we're facing the San Francisco 49ers. I remember we beat them. I think we went 4-12 a few years back. This was back when Matt Ryan was there. And we go on the road and we beat the Niners, who were 13-2 or something like that. People are like, dude, why are we winning? I'm like, dude, I'm going to sit and watch my team win. I don't care. I don't sit down on Sunday. I don't care what the record is to watch the Falcons lose. And the players don't either. Like you should be always cheering for a team to beat another team like that. It blows my mind that there's ever people that are like, why are we even winning this game? We should just lose out. Why do we get out of the top 5? Like we could have just lost 3 more games. Like, no, that's not how sustainable winning cultures are built. Like it's important to have those games because you look back on us beating the Niners last year. I guarantee you there's a sense of confidence that, hey, now we got better talent. Remember what we did to the Niners last year at home and they went to the NFC Championship? I don't care who was injured. Like that's in the back of your mind. And that helps you the next year. Like that's important.
Yeah, I think that, there's no examples ever of a team drafting 7th versus 5th because they lost the game that they should have won. And then, it was just the world was collapsing. Other than maybe the Texans and Bears last year, I'm sure the Texans would rather have Bryce Young than CJ Stroud, and the Texans winning in the last game of the year, didn't allow that to happen. I'm sure that, was a little annoying for Texans fans. But let me tell you this, just because a player, it's so circumstantial. Like the Texans are a terrible organization. They have the Panthers, though they've had their recent struggles, look like they're trending in the right direction. They have some guys on the defensive side. I love the regime. I don't want to play Bryce Young twice a year, every year for the next decade. But listen, Frank Reich is though I believe in D'Amico Ryans, what he can be, ownership and front office will never let him succeed because they're incompetent, whereas the Panthers are not. So even if they did get Bryce Young, there's no guaranteeing he was gonna pan out. And
there's no they got
Deshaun Watson did.
They got Deshaun Watson. Now, obviously, there's some extenuating circumstances to all that, but also, like, listen, they could have easily just traded with the Bears. Like, the Panthers gave up some, but they could have easily just moved up to the Bears. The Bears didn't even take Bryce Young. So if they wanted Bryce that badly and thought he was the guy, they could have easily made it happen. I mean, they moved up a ton to get Will Anderson. Like, they moved up. So the Texans are doing their own thing. So if you could say that about the Texans, they could have gotten Bryce Young probably way easier than the Panthers. They just didn't want him as badly. Coming up after the break, we are going to start giving some bold predictions for the second half of the Braves season.